The air hung heavy with dread, a palpable sense of impending doom. The Philistine army, a vast and terrible force, had marched upon the land of Israel, their numbers seemingly endless. Their chariots thundered across the plains, their ranks bristling with spears and swords, ready to unleash havoc. The Israelites, though brave, trembled at the sight, their hearts pounding with fear and uncertainty. They knew the Philistines were hungry for victory, eager to crush them under their iron heel, leaving no mercy. At the heart of the Israelite army stood King Saul, a figure once revered and respected. Once a towering figure of strength and courage, he was now a shadow of his former self, worn down by years of turmoil. Years of disobedience to God had taken their toll, leaving him fearful and uncertain, his spirit broken. The weight of his kingdom rested heavily upon his shoulders, and on this day the burden seemed unbearable, almost crushing. The two armies clashed on the slopes of Mount Gilboa, the battle fierce and unrelenting. The earth trembled beneath the weight of their struggle, the ground shaking with each blow. The air filled with the cries of the wounded and the dying, a symphony of agony and despair. The Philistines, stronger and fiercer, pushed the Israelites back, their lines crumbling under the relentless assault, their spirits breaking. Saul watched in despair as his army faltered, his heart sinking with each passing moment. His sons, Jonathan, Abinadab, and Melchishua, fought bravely by his side, but their courage could not stem the tide of battle. The enemy too strong. The day was lost, and a cold terror gripped Saul's heart, the realization of defeat settling in. The Philistine archers, deadly with their aim, pressed their advantage, their eyes cold and unyielding. Their arrows rained down upon the fleeing Israelites, cutting them down like wheat before the scythe, leaving no room for escape. Saul, his armor heavy upon him, stumbled as he fled, the cries of his enemies echoing in his ears, a cacophony of despair. He looked around for his sons, his heart pounding in his chest, each beat a reminder of his failure. Jonathan, his beloved Jonathan, lay dead upon the ground, an arrow piercing his heart, his lifeless eyes staring into the void. Abinadab and Melchishua, their bodies riddled with arrows, lay still nearby, their dreams extinguished. Saul's grief was immeasurable, a crushing weight that threatened to consume him, his soul crying out in agony. He was surrounded now, his guard cut down, his army scattered, the remnants of his once mighty force. The Philistine soldiers, their faces grim with victory, closed in on their defeated foe, their triumph palpable. Saul, his strength spent, knew that all was lost, the weight of his failures pressing down on him. Capture was inevitable, and with it, unimaginable humiliation and torture, a fate worse than death. He remembered the prophet Samuel's words spoken long ago, warning him of the consequences of his disobedience, words that now felt like a curse. "The Lord has torn the kingdom of Israel from you today," Samuel had declared, "and has given it to a neighbor of yours who is better than you, a prophecy now fulfilled." Those words, once distant and ignored, now rang in his ears with terrible clarity, a haunting echo of his downfall. Despair washed over Saul, cold and absolute. He would not be taken prisoner, would not endure the Philistines' cruel mockery. He would choose his own fate, even if it meant defying the will of God. He drew his sword, the cold steel heavy in his hand. Looking up at the darkening sky, he uttered a silent prayer, a plea for forgiveness that he knew might not be answered. Then, with a final surge of despairing resolve, he fell upon his own sword, the sharp blade piercing his flesh, ending his reign and his life. The Philistines, finding Saul's lifeless body on the battlefield, rejoiced in their victory. They stripped him of his armor, a final indignity for the fallen king. His crown, once a symbol of power and authority, lay tarnished in the dust, a grim reminder of the fleeting nature of earthly glory. Word of Saul's death spread like wildfire. The Philistines, eager to display their triumph, took his body and the bodies of his sons to the city of Beth-shan. There, on the walls of their pagan temple, they hung the lifeless forms as trophies of war, a gruesome spectacle for all to see. Mount Gilboa, once a place of hope and promise where Saul had first been anointed king, became a symbol of defeat and despair. The Israelites, hearing of their king's demise and the desecration of his body, were filled with grief and terror. They fled their homes, seeking refuge from the victorious Philistines. The Philistines, emboldened by their victory, rampaged through the land, pillaging and burning as they went. The future of Israel seemed bleak, their army shattered, their king dead, their God seemingly silent. But even in the darkest of hours, a glimmer of hope remained. Section 5. Courage from Jabesh Gilead. News of the Philistines' gruesome display reached the city of Jabesh Gilead, east of the Jordan River. The people were horrified and deeply troubled by the disrespect shown to their former king. The men of Jabesh Gilead, remembering Saul's act of kindness years earlier when he had rescued them from the Ammonites, were filled with a fierce determination. They could not forget the bravery and leadership Saul had shown in their time of need. They would not allow their former king to be dishonored in such a way. Their resolve was unshakable, driven by a deep sense of loyalty and gratitude. Under the cover of darkness, a group of these courageous men embarked on a perilous mission. They knew the risks were great, but their commitment to honor Saul's memory was greater. They crossed the Jordan River, infiltrated the heavily guarded city of Beth-shan, and retrieved the bodies of Saul and his sons. The mission required stealth, bravery, and unwavering determination. It was a daring act of defiance, a testament to their loyalty and their respect for the fallen king. Their actions spoke volumes about their character and their values. Returning to Jabesh Gilead, they gave Saul and his sons a proper burial, burning their bodies and burying their bones beneath a tamarisk tree. This act was not just a burial, but a final tribute to their king. For 7 days they mourned the fallen king, their lamentations a poignant reminder of the tragic consequences of pride and disobedience. Their mourning was a solemn and heartfelt expression of their loss and respect. Section 6. A King's Legacy. The story of Saul's reign is a tragedy, a tale of promise squandered and potential unfulfilled. He began his reign with such hope, chosen by God, anointed by Samuel, a shining example of strength and leadership. But pride and disobedience became his downfall, leading him down a path of destruction that ended in despair and death. Saul's story is not just a historical account confined to the pages of the Bible. It's a timeless parable, a cautionary tale that speaks to the human condition. It reminds us that even the greatest of leaders are not immune to the temptations of pride and the consequences of disobedience. Section 7. Humility, the antidote to pride. Saul's life stands as a stark reminder of the destructive power of pride. Pride whispers that we are wiser than God, that our ways are better than His. It blinds us to our own flaws and leads us to make choices that ultimately bring about our own downfall. Humility, the opposite of pride, is the recognition of our dependence on God. It is acknowledging that we are not the masters of our own destiny, that true strength and wisdom come from seeking God's guidance and obeying His commands. Section 8. Obedience, the path to blessing. Saul's downfall began with his disobedience. Time and again, he chose to follow his own desires rather than God's commands. He allowed his fear and pride to cloud his judgment, leading him to make choices that had disastrous consequences. Obedience, on the other hand, is the key to God's blessings. When we trust in God and follow His ways, we open ourselves to His guidance and protection. Obedience is not always easy, but it is always the path to true peace and fulfillment. Section 9. The peril of disobedience. Saul's story illustrates the dangerous consequences of disobedience. When we turn away from God's commands, we invite chaos and destruction into our lives. Disobedience is a slippery slope that leads us further and further away from God's love and grace. The consequences of our disobedience may not always be immediate or as dramatic as Saul's, but they're always real and far-reaching. Disobedience breaks our fellowship with God, hinders our prayers, and robs us of the joy and peace that come from living in His will. Section 10. God's faithfulness in the face of failure. Even in Saul's tragic end, we see glimpses of God's faithfulness. Despite Saul's repeated disobedience, God continued to show him mercy and compassion. He provided a way out of every difficult situation, offering Saul opportunities to repent and turn back to Him. God's love for us is not contingent on our performance. He loves us unconditionally, even when we fail. He is always ready to forgive us, to heal our brokenness, and to make us new. Section 11. Epilogue. A story that still speaks. The story of King Saul is a timeless tale that continues to resonate with us today. It is a story of promise and failure, of pride and humility, of obedience and disobedience. It is a story that challenges us to examine our own hearts, to confront our own tendencies toward pride and disobedience, and to choose the path of humility and obedience. May we learn from Saul's mistakes and strive to be leaders who are characterized by humility, obedience, and a deep dependence on God. For in doing so, we will not only avoid the tragic fate of Saul, but we will also experience the fullness of God's blessings in our lives and lead others to do the same.